our esteemed Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Savita Acharya. I will also request the President of OEA, Dr. Jugal Mahapatra, the Head of the Department, Applied and Analytical Economics, Professor Mitali Chinara, and the Secretary of Orissa Economic Association, Dr. Amarendra Das. I will request all of them to kindly grace the occasion. Now we request to play the theme song, and for that I will request all of you to please stand. There is some technical glitch, I suppose. We are extremely sorry for the inconvenience created. The Orissa Economic Association, founded in the year 1968, was accorded the status of Learned Registered Society by the Government of Orissa under the Societies Registration Act of 1868. And since its inception, it has been long 55 years, the association has been working tremendously to upmark in order to proceed the career of the students. It was one of the oldest regional academic associations in the country, and the association was founded in Ravenshaw College under by Professor Sadashiv Mishra, the very first president of OEA, with a very dedicated team of eminent economists, including Dr. Debroy Mishra, Dr. Chakra Mishra, Dr. Kheta Mohan Patnaik, Sri Agarwal, whose name has remained forever in our hearts and soul. At present, the OEA has more than 700 members and also has 2 institutional members. Now I would request our students to kindly facilitate our guest of honor, Dr. Bibek Debroy, sir, with the bouquet. So please. I request the students to honor our respected Vice Chancellor, ma'am. I request to honor respected President, Dr. Jugal Mahapatra, and Mitali ma'am. So the broad objective of the association has been to engage with the debates and discussion on economic issues of contemporary relevance, to conduct various seminars, symposium, workshops, and various similar events. It also ensures to contribute towards improving the methodology and the process of teaching economics in the state, thereby incorporating modern pedagogy. To strengthen the overall socio-economic research environment and provide policy input has been the rigor of this association. To disseminate research findings and contribute to the capacity building of young aspirants, researchers, and teachers, it acts as a very pivotal role. So since its inception, the association has been conducted several activities. To name few of these recent activities, the association conducted the The 54th annual conference during February 2022, which was on a hybrid mode, and the theme of the conference was COVID-19, Indian economy, economic recovery, innovation, and the system. The 55th conference was held in physical mode at Kalahandi University with the pertinent theme of transforming local economics, livelihood, and migration in Orissa, and along with that, looking into the reality of local economics, urbanization, communities, and sustainable development has been the inaugural studies. Along with that, the association also conducted a pre-conference workshop along with a poster competition to encourage the young budding researchers and the students. And now, in 56th conference, it has been proposed to held at Sambhalpur University with the broad theme on inclusion and sustainability. So research capacity building, and along with that, the Odisha Vision 2036 Conclave, which is the near-arcing event of Odisha Economic Association, has been a great balance of the week. Now, I would request our esteemed professor, head of the department, Dr. Nipali Chinara ma'am, to kindly welcome the guest. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Sikta. Esteemed Dr. Bibek Debroy, Chairman, Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, esteemed Professor Savita Acharya ma'am, Vice Chancellor of Uttal University, the President of Odisha Economic Association, Dr. Jigol Kishore Mahapatra, and the Secretary, Dr. Amarendra Das. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all to this academic activity, event, which is being jointly organized by Odisha Economic Association and the Department of Analytical and Applied Economics, Uttal University. I welcome you all to this academic event with wholeheartedness. As the curtains are drawn to the much awaited G20 Leaders Summit in Delhi, India, that is Bharat, is poised to be a beacon of hope for prosperity, participative parlays and peace. Not just in the short run, which is of course important, but also in the Amrit Kaal of the 25 years leading to the 100th year of India's independence and beyond. As India acquires a towering and comforting position of leadership in the Committee of Nations, it is instructive to reflect on what will be the key elements of this Amrit Kaal. And also, who better to lead us in our reflection than the Chairman of the Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister of India, Dr. Bibek Debroy. Welcome you, sir, to our university, that is Uttal University, the mother university of the state of Odisha, and the largest, one of the largest universities of the country. Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored to have amidst us a colossus who wears many hats. A professional economist by training, a passionate raconteur by passion, a sagely Indologist, and a part-time poet, churning out and brief puns on a day-to-day happenings. He has authored more than 200 books and articles on a variety of topics including economics, Indology, and public policy. He is the recipient of the Padma Shri, the fourth highest civilian award of Odisha, of India. Dr. Bibek Debroy is an economist, was educated at Ramakrishna Mission School, Narendrapur, at the Presidency College, Kolkata, the Delhi School of Economics, and Trinity College, Cambridge. At present, as has been pointed out, he is the Chairman, Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister, Government of India. He has worked at various places which includes the Presidency College, Institute of Politics and Economics at Pune, Indian Institute of Foreign Trade, Delhi, and many more. He was a part of Niti Aayog up to 5th June 2019, after which he has risen to the current post which he takes now. Dr. Bibek Debroy's approach to economics has been far from conventional. He blends approaches from multiple disciplines to bring forth fresh perspectives on areas of economic policy making. In his elocution today, he will be sharing with us his thoughts on the Indian economy, the path to 2047. I welcome you again, sir, to Utkal University. We have with us the Vice Chancellor of Utkal University, Professor Dr. Savita Acharya, the first woman Vice Chancellor of the biggest and the mother university of the state. Professor Acharya is an Indian anthropologist and expert in social and cultural anthropology who holds the Commonwealth Postdoctoral Fellowship Award, granting her the experience of working at the prestigious University of Oxford. Professor Acharya has served in various capacities in this university. She has been the Chairperson Postgraduate Council, the Director of College Development Council, the Director of School of Women's Study, and that way she has been a part and parcel of the university for the last more than 3 decades. She has done her doctoral work on anthropology of pilgrimage at Puri and Simanchalam from Utkal University and undertaken field work in different tribal and rural villages to study different aspects of rural and tribal communities, including the particularly vulnerable tribal groups of Odisha. She has presented research papers which are very well appreciated at various international and national academic forums. I welcome Professor Dr. Savita Acharya to this conclave. Thank you, ma'am, for sharing your time. We have with us Dr. Jugal Kishore Mahapatra, a well-known name in the state of Odisha. Dr. Mahapatra is a postgraduate from Delhi School of Economics who joined the Indian Administrative Service in the Odisha cadre in the year 1979. Later, he also obtained a master's in economics from the Boston University, USA in 1992. During his career in civil service, spanning for over 37 years, he has served as Secretary to the Chief Minister of Odisha, Principal Secretary Finance, Development Commissioner and Chief Secretary in Odisha Government. He was Secretary in the Department of Fertilizers and Rural Development in Government of India during 2014 and 16. Post-retirement, Dr. Mahapatra has done his doctoral research in economics from the Exime University, Bhubaneswar. At present, he is a non-executive chairman of Shriram Finance Limited and India International Bullion Exchange. He is also an independent director of UMTC, a company under the Ministry of Urban Development, and FDVRC, a non-profit company under the Ministry of Rural Development. He is also a government nominee to the Disciplinary Committee of ICAI. At present, Dr. Mahapatra is the President of Odisha Economic Association. I welcome you, sir, to the Utkal University and Department of Analytical and Applied Economics. We have with us Dr. Amarendra Das, the Secretary of Odisha Economic Association, who is currently working as a Reader F at the National Institute for Science, Education and Research. He is an alumnus of this department, this university, who served in this university for quite a period of time, and he also served the 14th Finance Commission, and he was a part of the 14th Finance Commission. I welcome Dr. Amarendra Das to this academic country. Last but not the least, I welcome all my teachers, university officials, for the members of Odisha Economic Association and my faculty members from other departments, my dear student friends, and also the former president of Odisha Economic Association for being here with us today, this day, to be a part of this wonderful event, which is a special lecture to be delivered by none other than the chairman of Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, Dr. Bibek Debroy. Thank you all.
Ma'am, for your wonderful introduction, for all our eminent guests present over here. Now I would request our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Dr. Savita Acharya, ma'am, to set the welcome address. Madam, please.
Good morning to all of you. Esteemed members on the dais, Dr. Bibek Debroy, Chairman Economic Advisory Council to Prime Minister, Dr. Jugal Mahapatra, President, Odisha Economic Association, Professor Mithali Chenara, Head of the Department of A&A Economics, Dr. Amarendra Das, Secretary, Odisha Economic Association, and on the dais, all the distinguished professors, alumni, faculty members, and all my dear friends, research scholars, media persons. Today, the Department of A&A Economics, along with the association, they are organizing this important special lecture on Indian economy, the path to 2047. This is a very welcoming attempt taken by the department. So I congratulate the head of the department and the entire team of A&A Economics, along with the association, Odisha Economic Association, for organizing such type of special lecture. It is a great pleasure to welcome on my own behalf and on behalf of Uttar University to Dr. Bibek Debroy, to the Chairman, Economic Advisory Council, to the Prime Minister of India. So it is a great honor to welcome you, sir. So he will deliver on Indian economy, the path to 2047, which is national, which is having national relevance. And I also welcome the President, OEA, Dr. Jugal Mahabatra, who is a very well-known case in Odisha, and Dr. Amarendra Das, who is the Secretary of Odisha Economic Association. I welcome you both for this special lecture. So as you know, the chief speaker, the main attraction of today's special lecture is Dr. Bibek Debroy. So I speak few words as I understood of the topic. So now, in India, the concept of Atmanirbhar Bharat, or self-reliant India, that is a vision of economic empowerment, technological advancement, and social development. So this vision extends far beyond the economic self-sufficiency. It is a holistic approach which aims to empower every Indian and contribute positively to the world, to the society. So this vision is not merely a political slogan, but a commitment to make India self-sufficient in every possible way. So our journey towards Atmanirbhar Bharat is not a solitary one. We are the part of recently conducted G20, a group of the world's largest economies. And as we move forward, we carry the hopes and aspirations of over 1 billion of people throughout the globe. So as the host of G20 summit, India has a unique opportunity to set the global economic agenda and promote inclusive growth for all. It is known to all of us. So as if we look Vision 2047, which marks the centenary of our independence, we can set our ambitions, our goals to work together. So, as a result, a sustainable and inclusive economic growth, which is one of the core pillars of Atmanirbhar Bharat and Vision 2047, can be fruitful. So we aim not only to recover from the challenges posed by global pandemic, but also to emerge stronger and more resilient. As you know, the recent economic growth projections in India indicate that it is poised for a significant transformation. We are in the stage of transformation, and we are focusing on important sectors like renewable energy, healthcare, and technology, which will not only drive our economic progress, but also can contribute to the global solutions. For example, for the climate change, public health. So economic growth should not be an end in itself, but as a means to improve the quality of life for all citizens in India. It should create jobs, reduce poverty, reduce the income inequality gap. So to achieve these objectives, we need a comprehensive approach that focuses on education, healthcare, infrastructure, and social welfare. So we must invest also in research and development, which is also a key area to foster innovation and the potential for our youth. So at the same time, we should ensure that our growth is sustainable and should be environmentally responsible. So now, time has come to work together to make Atmanirbhar Bharat and Vision 2047 a reality, where self-reliance and holistic development are not just a national aspiration, but a global commitment to a better future for all. And in my concluding remark, I can say we should work seriously towards the strategies of the path of 2047, the Indian economy, the path of 2047. So it will definitely have a definite strategies to achieve the goals which we have fixed. Thank you all. Jai Jagannath. Bombay Uttar.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your wonderful insights. Now it's time for the most important session for which we have all assembled here to welcome this momentous occasion as we have gathered here to envision and celebrate, take up the India at 2047 100 years of independence, which is going to be enough. And as we will embark on this journey of reflection and anticipation, let us pause to ponder what has India achieved in us with the era and what awaits us in the next stage of our incredible journey. So India, by the way, Bharat's shining with holding its position with being the fifth largest economy in the world and aspiring to reach 43rd in the next 2020. So I would request our honorable guest of honor, Dr. Bibek Debroy, sir, to come over and address with his insights. A big round of applause for our honorable guest, Debroy from the horse's mouth itself. Welcome, sir.
Dr. Mahapatra, the President of the OEA Economic Association, Dr. Amarendra Das, Professor Ali Chinara, faculty members and students, Let me first thank the OEA Economic Association and Utkal University for having invited me here to talk to you. I'm a fairly frequent visitor to Malaysia. It happens to be one of my favorite cities. But it's my first visit to Utkal University. But I'm presumably not a favorite visitor to Utkal. The topic that I chose to speak on is the Indian economy and the path to 2047. As has already been mentioned, we are in the midst of Amrit Kaal, so we are setting out the trajectory of hope, a trajectory of aspirations for what the Indian economy might be in the year 2047. What was not very explicit in the introduction is that Mr. Mahapatra, Dr. Mahapatra now, Yugal and I, we studied at the Delhi School of Economics at the same time. When we were students and we studied developmental economics, we used to be told that there were the developed countries in the world, there were the developing countries, and there were the LDCs. And it would take generations for the developed countries catch up, it will take generations for the developing countries to catch up. After being students, whenever we went abroad, invariably we would be defensive about India and the Indian economy. We would look around the rest of the world and wonder, why can't India be like this? The coverage of India was on yoga, Indian cuisine, sometimes Kashmir, a little later. All of that has significantly changed. The G20 meeting recently in Delhi is merely vindication. Let us cast our minds back, not all the way back to the 70s when we were students in Delhi School of Economics, but to the time around. As a result of COVID, many of us lost dear ones, close ones, family members, friends. But when COVID as an exogenous shock was thrust not only upon India but upon the rest of the world, there was a dire prognosis emanating particularly from the United States, particularly from non-resident states. Millions of people would die in India. If you look back now, particularly if you normalize for population, India has done much better than many of the so-called developed countries. There's a dire prognosis that India would never be able to produce its own vaccine. Not only has India produced its own vaccine, India has exported vaccines. There was a dire prognosis that India would never be able to vaccinate its population. India has been able. A lot of expert wisdom from economists in the West argue that India should increase public expenditure. India did increase public expenditure, but the public expenditure that was increased was primarily capital expenditure. The goal of fiscal consolidation was never given up. There were no tax breaks. There was no particular increase in revenue expenditure other than what had already been happening. It is not my job to comment on what is happening in the rest of the world. But the reason many of the countries in the so-called West are in trouble is for reckless fiscal profligacy in the period of 2047. 2047 is 24 years. The honest to God answer is no one knows what is going to happen in 2047. If you cast your minds back 24 years ago and ask yourself, 24 years ago in the year 1999, would you have expected the kind of changes India has witnessed today? Anything that you predicted in all probability would have been wrong. And many of the things that you predicted would not have come. Nonetheless, there are some clear facts. In terms of the trends, let's get the base. India is still a relatively poor. India's income and India's per capita income will be in rupees. But to make international comparisons possible, one needs to convert it to some common currency, some common numeraire, so that the comparisons can be made. And that common numeraire or that common currency happens to be the US dollar. And broadly speaking, there are two ways to do it. One way to do it is to use the official exchange rate, the rupee dollar official exchange rate. And the other way to do it is to do what economists refer to as purchasing power parity or PPP, based on the argument that roughly 80 rupees buys much more in India than $1 buys in the US. I'm not going to talk about PPP. Let's talk about official. India's per capita income today is 2,500 rupees. Not PPP, official exchange. For those of you who are students, please do not Google or look up the World Bank and say, hey, he was wrong, it's not 2,500, it's 2,300. The reason is there is a slight time lag. When the World Bank comes up with figures, that is like today, India's per capita income is roughly 2,500. In 1991, when the reforms started, or the present cycle of reforms started, India's per capita income was 310. From 310, we moved to 2,500. Is 2,500 high or low? I don't know. Many things in life are relative. Is he tall or short? Relative. There's a famous economist named Lord Keynes. Anything that is clever and you do not know who said it, if it is literature, you can safely say Oscar Wilde said it and no one will question. Exactly similarly, in the area of economics, if there is something remotely clever and someone asks you who said it and you say Lord Keynes, no one will question. So there is an anecdote about Lord Keynes. Lord Keynes was apparently asked, "How is your wife?" And he said, "Compared to whose wife?" So like that, 2,500, is that high or low? The richest country in the world has a per capita income of about 175,000. So there is 175,000 and there is 3,000. So whenever we look forward towards 2047, let us not forget the base at least. What is India going to look like in 2047? If I am going to do that exercise in dollar terms, there are certain assumptions I need to make. I need to assume what the rupee-dollar exchange rate is going to be. I need to assume what the inflation rate is going to be. I need to assume what the real rate of growth is going to be. These are the three critical assumptions. What is the exchange rate going to be? What is the inflation rate going to be? And what is going to be the real rate of growth? Whenever an economy does relatively well, the exchange rate tends to appreciate over the long term. In the short run, you are either economists or you are going to be economists. No economist knows how the exchange rate actually works. Otherwise, Dr. Mahapatra and I would have gone and made some money. We don't know how the exchange rate actually behaves. Particularly in these parts of the country, people are fond of penalty kicks being given. I'm standing there as a goalkeeper. There's a probability of 1/3 that the ball will be struck to my left, a probability of 1/3 it will be struck to the right, a probability of 1/3 that the strike will be right at the center. So purely in probability terms, a goalkeeper is equally better off standing in the center. Have you ever seen any goalkeeper do that? No. Because spectators will say the goalkeeper is stupid. So the goalkeeper will either leap to the left or leap to the right. A goalkeeper typically will not stand in the middle. Exactly similarly, there are all kinds of sophisticated models that try to suggest what the exchange rate is doing. In talking about projections for 2047, the safest thing to assume is that the exchange rate is going to be exactly where it is. What about the inflation rate? The inflation rate, partly thanks to the RBI's norms, one is reasonably safe on what that inflation rate is going to be. So going back to the question I was asking, it therefore boils down to try and determine what is the real rate of growth. And there are various ways of doing it. One way of doing it is to do what every economist is familiar with, namely an aggregate production function for the economy. Feed in the labor input, feed in the capital input, feed in some measure of productivity, and thereby arrive at some kind of decision on what is likely to be the real rate of growth. One way to do it. These are not independent ways. A second way to do it is to recognize that an all-India rate of growth is nothing but a summation of state-level rates of growth, GSDP growth rates, with the exception of defense, with the exception of railways, with the exception of national highways. 90 to 95% is a summation of state growth rates. So let us therefore take a call on what is likely to be the state-level growth rates. Let us try and aggregate. A third possible way of doing it is to aggregate in terms of sectoral contributions to national income. What is going to be the role or the contribution of manufacturing and or industry? What is going to be the contribution of the primary sector and or agriculture? What is going to be the contribution of the services? A final way of aggregating and arriving at that overall growth rate is to look at the four primary determinants of growth: consumption, private investments, government expenditure, and net expenditure. All of these are different methods. And you can sit down with your own calculators, even the mobiles or laptops, and do your projections. Whichever assumptions you use, you will arrive at a real rate of growth between 6.5% and 7.5%. In the worst case scenario, you will arrive at 6.5%. In a best case scenario, you will arrive at something like 7.5%. Why not higher? The reason for that is obvious. In the past, when India attained annual real rates of growth of 9%, the global environment was a kinder one. When many countries in East Asia and China exhibited a high rates of growth, the external world was a more benign one. Therefore, exports provided a significant source of growth. 2047, of course, is far away, but today the external world is not that kind. Not only are there geopolitical tensions, Russia, Ukraine, there are protectionist pressures, there has been a retreat from liberalization. Consequently, India's exports, particularly of goods, haven't been doing that well. India's exports of services have been doing rather well. But the simple point is that in the absence of the global economy recovering significantly, it would be unrealistic to expect a real rate of growth of something like that. You can hope for it. I happen to think it's somewhat unlikely. We therefore have this band of somewhere between 6.5 to 7.5%. Stretch it a little bit and you will get 8%. The human mind cannot grasp the exponential. The human mind grasps the linear function, the exponential function is impossible to grasp. Remember that ancient story about the king and the minister who had invented chess? And the king said, what do you want as a reward? And the minister said, 1 grain of rice for the first square, double for the second, double for the third, and so on until you get to the power 64. King said, what's the problem? Here it is. Once you go up in terms of the exponents, grain would not have been enough. Those of us who are older will remember celebrated BRICS report, the Goldman Sachs report in 2003, which gave you exponential figures on what India would look like in the year 2047, 2050 actually, and everyone sat up and took notes. What many of us fail to remember is that the real rate of growth in the Goldman Sachs report was 5.5%. Large part of the contribution came from exchange rate appreciation. In other words, the exponential impact of a real rate of growth of 6.5 to 7.5% is impossible for us sitting here to comprehend. Let us take the bottom of that band of 6.5% and apply it to India's aggregate GDP. Not PPP, I said I'm not concerned with PPP, official exchanges. India's per capita income with the low figure on the band in 2047 will be 10,000 US. The World Bank no longer uses classifications like developed and developed. It uses classifications like low income, middle income, so on and so forth. Today, India is in the lower middle income. India will then move to the higher income category. There is no precise definition of developed anymore, but roughly speaking, you can say that developed means a per capita income of 13,000 US. I said a lower band. If I take a higher band of real growth rate, as the SBI recently has done in one of its forecasts, India will move to the developed. The size of the Indian economy in 2047 will be at the lower end of the band, 20 trillion US dollars. Higher end of the band, 30 trillion US dollars. If I extrapolate the rates of growth today, roughly in 26-27, using official exchange rates, India will become the third largest economy. It already is according to PPP. I am talking about official. Some of you may be aware of the work done by historians like Angus Madison and his colleagues. And you will read figures about the share of India then, although India then is not geographically the India today, the share of India in the global economy. An economy of the size of 20 trillion or higher, even if its per capita income is relatively low at 10,000 US dollars, is a force globally to reckon, which is part of the recognition that came from the G20 meeting. The question before all of us is, as economists and future economists, is what can we possibly do, what can governments do to ensure that the aspiration is not 6.5%, but is 7.5%. The aspiration is not 7.5%, but is 8.5%, notwithstanding what I said about the global economy. Even that 1% or 1.5% makes a big difference exponentially. So in bulleted form, let me quickly list out some of these areas. I will not expand on any of them in great detail because of paucity of time, but let me quickly mention some of these. The first area is of deciding what the government should do. When I say government, I don't mean only union government, I mean state governments also. 2/3 of expenditure in India roughly happens at the level of state. So what should the government be spending? All of us want the government to do all kinds of things. The government must spend 10% of GDP on infrastructure. The government must spend 4% of GDP on health. The government must spend 6% of GDP on education. The government must spend 3% of GDP on defense. If I add all of that up, I come to 23%. How much collectively do we contribute as taxes? Around 15%. If we are going to contribute 15% as taxes, but our expectation on the part of the government is that it should spend 23% of GDP, something has to give something. Either our expectations need to be downgraded, or we should be willing to pay more as taxes. When I say willing to pay more as taxes, do not look at it purely from the point of view of a person who earns salaries. Think of the broader picture. Think of the corporate sector. Think of unincorporated enterprise which pays the personal income tax rates. about the large degree of exemptions. Quite often people talk of tax avoidance and tax evasion. There's a difference. Tax evasion is when I'm doing something illegal. Tax avoidance is when I'm not doing anything illegal. What I'm doing is perfectly legal. I'm availing of the exemptions. Roughly speaking, all the exemptions together will amount to about 5%. 15 plus 5 is 20. So there is the broader agenda of tax reform, both direct and indirect. And as I said, as a collective entity, we need to decide what is the role. What is the role for the government and what level? All too often, decentralization and fiscal devolution is interpreted as union to states. But decentralization and fiscal devolution is not only union to states, it is within states also. So we should be debating not only what the Union Finance Commission does, we should also be debating what the state finance commissions do and what has happened to them. So this is bullet point number 1. Bullet point number 2. When one looks at the 1991 reforms, the reforms that really happened were reforms that pertain to what economists call product markets. The factor markets have still largely been unreformed. Land, labor. Reforms, however you interpret them, are about competition. Competition requires free entry and free exit. Until the IBC came into being, capital did not exist in India. Even now when it exits reluctantly with the danda. If I look at labor markets and land markets, both of these are largely unreformed. I will not get into the details. In every economics department, it is fairly fashionable to write papers on the poor state of farmers. Who is a farmer? What is the definition of a farmer? In every state, the definition of a farmer is linked to the ownership, ancestral or otherwise, of agriculture. Look at the state of land. There are states in India where the cadastral surveys still go back to 1910. We have all the technology in the world today to use satellite imagery, to use revenue records, to have things that are almost like Aadhaar numbers for plots of land. Particularly for students, I would urge you to look at a government initiative called Bhu Aadhaar and ask yourself why that Bhu Aadhaar cannot be replicated countrywide, and the answer is because the surveys are very good. So my second item would be reform of the factor markets, land and labor. Related to that is my third point, which is about formalization. India is still largely an informal economy, and I'm using the word formalization formalization in a double sense. There is formalization of individuals and there is formalization of enterprises. Most of MSME, 95 to 97% of MSME is not registered under any law today. I'm not even talking about the companies. I do not have tabs on workers. Yes, there is a portal now, but it is voluntary. Yes, we have begun an exercise of Aadhaar. Yes, there is an important exercise of matching programs that are tied to individuals like Jan Dhan to schemes that are tied to households like MG and REGA. But the simple point is we need a greater degree of formalization, not overnight, but over a period. The next bulleted point I will mention is urbanization. Everywhere in the world, urbanization is correlated with economic development. Therefore, it's desirable that urbanization should happen. What is the nature of governance? What are the sources of funding for that urbanization? If you travel around the country, you will find urbanization has picked up everywhere. But look at the nature of that urbanization. There are urban areas which have municipalities. And of course the villages have panchayats. But most of the chaotic urbanization happens in areas that the census calls census towns, which you will detect at the peripheries of any urban center, I suspect even Bhubaneswar. And there is no governance in those areas to stop. I'm not making a specific point of Bhubaneswar. This is true of every urban center. India is a country where it is very difficult to have greenfield urbanization. All our urbanization will be brownfield, and therefore we need to plan that urbanization. Two final points and then I will stop. The next bulleted point I want to quickly mention is about the legal system. The legal system is typically not included as part of infrastructure, but it should be, because the legal system underpins everything that we do. If we have close to 50 million cases stuck in Indian courts and tribunals, then the legal system does not provide enough of a deterrent. It does not punish malafide acts, and it does not protect bona fide disputes. So unless we fix the legal system, and there are civil aspects to it, there are criminal aspects to it, we will never get the efficiency gains that the legal system can contribute. The last point I want to make, and it's a controversial point, which is why I have saved the best, is the issue of equality. Very fashionable to argue against equality. But we should be clear about what we do. There is inequity and there is inequality. Equity is ensured if I say that every student, irrespective of means, should have equal chance in getting admitted to a university. That's equity. That, to my mind, is a right definition of equality. Inequality sometimes, the way it is interpreted, means that every student who passes out of Utkal University must get the same marks. We have to be clear about it. The government has done a lot in terms of providing basic necessities. They are there in their dashboards. And one of the reasons why India coped so well at the time of COVID was because of the provision of basic necessities, including a state like Odisha, particularly a state. That, to my mind, is the right definition of inclusion. That, to my mind, is the right definition of weekend. And such things have great multipliers. If the gender disparity in education declines, if more women get enrolled, I'm not really bothered about what the multipliers are, because that is an end in itself. But once that end happens, the multipliers will fine. This is about India in 2014. India is a democracy and we are proud of India. Proud of India. In a democracy, legislatures react to the will of the people indirectly. Not directly, indirectly. You can't possibly have a referendum on everything. Life expectancy in India has been going up. But we are absolutely certain, despite the uncertainty about the future, that Dr. Jugal Mahapatra and I will not be alive. Some of the others in the front row will also not be alive. Who will be alive in 2047? The rest of you, the students. That dream, that aspiration of 2047 is for you to do. India will not become a better governed country. India will not become a more prosperous country only because of what it does. It will become a more prosperous country. It will become a better governed country because of what citizens like you. The question of self-doubt. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your wisdom. And I hope also has been momentum in terms of taking the ideas. Now the floor is open for questions, honestly for clarification. So I will request to ask the questions. The mic will be handed over to you. But please be brief and specific, looking into the interest of time. Questions, please.
Hello, sir. My question, the recent question of the conclude of the G20 related. There is a working group, non-participant working group of G20, and the government has initiated Youth 20, Women 20, SAI 20, Business 20, and all. Now, under Business 20, they came up with a decision of not a conscious decision regarding cryptocurrency. So what is government's strategy for taking this particular matter into account? This is number one. My second question is that what government strategy, that particularly regarding the subsidy thing, which is still exists after Indian 1947 also till date, still it is continuing. Do you think that it will continue, it will persist up to 2047, that is 100 years? Thank you.
let's be clear about one thing, that whatever government wants to do and wants to make an announcement about, government is unlikely to use me, who at Orissa Economic Association even make that announcement. There are proper government channels for doing that. The first part, the finance minister has already said very clearly what the government's position is on it. And I have nothing to add to it beyond the obvious, that outright banning of something serves no purpose. But leaving it completely unregulated also serves no purpose. So there needs to be some kind of regulation. That's obvious and is understandable. The problem that arises is what is the content of that regulation. And in general, not merely for the sake of crypto, we have two completely different kinds of jurisprudence. One is the US and the other one is the EU. Ours is neither close to the US nor is it close to the EU. It is somewhere in between, and I'm sure something like that will also happen. You asked a question of about subsidies. It is impossible to give a blanket answer because there are subsidies and subsidies. So unless you explain, it's difficult to answer that. There are some subsidies which are state government subsidies, whether it is the power sector or whether it is road transport or something like that. There are subsidies which are inbuilt into the legislation. Food is an example of that. Now, obviously, legislative changes will be needed. You asked a question about 2047. Remember what I said at the end of 2047? Remember what I said at the end? That fundamentally what government does is a reaction to what all of us want. If all of us want the subsidies, they will remain till 2047. However, I hope that as collective entities we will recognize that subsidies are costless, are not costless, and whatever I am paying in the form of a subsidy has opportunity costs which could have been spent on something else, and therefore I hope as a collective entity we will argue against the removal of those subsidies. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. At the interest of time, I would request the participants to kindly be specific.
Good morning, sir. My question is specific in terms of how do you look at the headwinds in 2047, headwinds to the economy in 2047 in terms of China factor? How much China will impact India's economy by 2047?
Any more questions, please? We are really privileged to have participants.
The trouble with reacting about China is there are a lot of things about China, including pricing, economic decision making, they are not very transparent. The news coming out of China, as you know from reading newspapers also, is not very good. As of now, the Chinese economy is close to collapse, which has its own internal political implications in China, but I'm not concerned about that. So far as the Indian economy is concerned, if Chinese growth suffers, then obviously it affects the world economy. And if it affects the world economy, it naturally affects India, not purely in terms of growth, which is yes, but also in terms of the volatility. But India is not that exposed directly to the effects of a Chinese slowdown. Particularly after COVID, although this is something that had started pre-COVID, India has moved away on many imports that used to happen from China, because in any event it is undesirable to remain fixated on only one source for your inputs, whether it is from pharmaceutical intermediates or whether it is IT chips. One of the things which I think has still not registered in the public consciousness is the degree to which, partly thanks to PLI, manufacturing is becoming relocated in India, and India is becoming part of that global supply chain. To give one example of that, until recently, if you looked at our mobile exports, 20% was so-called smartphones, 80% were ordinary phones. Today it's completely reversed. 80% of our exports are smartphones. That is primarily, of course, Samsung and Apple. And one of the things that's happened, not because of China, but it has happened because of COVID and initiatives before COVID, is the digital public infrastructure. Other countries are also beginning to try and emulate. Sometimes we think of the digital public infrastructure only as Qatar. India's stack is much more than Qatar. So the sum and substance, the simple one-line answer is, there are some minuses, but I don't think the minuses are that significant for India. There are also quite a few pluses.
So, I'm extremely thankful to you, sir, for this media talk. Extremely benefited. It felt like attending the class of a very learned professor. On the one hand, and on the other hand, I felt like being listening to a very skilled, involved practitioner, chairman of the Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister. So, thank you, sir. Thank you so much. My only question is regarding agricultural reform, because I am very passionate about that. I personally feel that it is very much required. I would like to know from you what kind of agricultural reform the government is taking on the way, or you would say that what should be taken to take us to the developed 2047 that dream of. That's the only question.
You're asking the wrong person. Because as you know only too well, unless it is a border measure, agriculture is completely a state government subject. So you should not ask someone from the union government. You should ask for the respective state government. Broadly speaking, the gamut of agricultural reforms covers everything. Production, distribution, nature of subsidies, expenditure, seeds, public extension services, land markets. So this is a simple answer.
We have last one question from the student.
Hello sir, I was asking that how do you manage to stay neutral in such a highly political environment while taking decisions like economic decisions for the country?
That is a value judgment that I am neutral, because if you look at the abuse that is heaped upon me every day on X, on Twitter, no one perceives me to be neutral. But you see, okay, let me explain the following. The Economic Advisory Council's inputs, by its very nature, they remain confidential. Therefore, very rarely do we come out publicly with what our positions are as the Economic Advisory Council. It is a different matter that several members of the Economic Advisory Council in their personal capacities may write in the newspapers. So the Economic Advisory Council's inputs, which remain confidential, are sometimes, and I hope this is not inspoken, are sometimes also critical, deliberately so, critical of government initiatives. So the way we do it is, it's a body. So when we meet, there is a discussion of the particular issue. It's a very similar, I don't know, to the people from newspapers here. It's very similar to an edit meeting at a newspaper, where there is a discussion and a debate, and then you come out with an edit which is an unsigned edit which reflects the opinion of the newspaper. So like that we debate it, and then we come out with what is the view of the Economic Advisory Council as a whole. But as I said, almost everything that we do remains confidential only for the eyes of the PM. So therefore, a question that I'm invariably asked, which thankfully I was not asked here, is what exactly does the Economic Advisory Council do?
Yeah, I think the question will be unending. We'll receive all the questions and then mail it at the Odisha Economic Association website. Now I will request our Honorable President of Odisha Economic Association, Dr. Jugal Vishwa Mahapatra, sir, to kindly conclude with his remarks. Sir, please.
Thank you, Dr. Debroy, Professor Chinara, our distinguished faculty members, members of OEA, and very dear students. I would not like to sum up what Dr. Debroy has said in his own unique, inimitable style. I think it's it must have registered with all of you with absolute profundity. There is no doubt about that. That's the only reason why we decided to host this lecture in a university. We would have done it in some other forum where only members would be there. But the idea was to bring somebody like him to the students and have a kind of give you a flavor of what Indian economy is likely to be when it completes 100 years. One important point he has made, that something will happen in terms of business as usual. But that's not the way India should look forward to 2047. If you would like to go, in 2047 you have to make a choice where you want to be. Once you decide your destiny, then the paths will become clear. There will not be one path, there will be multiple paths. But the important message that I take away from the lecture today is that there are some very key reforms that we have to carry out. Not just at the central government level, at the state government level, and at the city government or local body level. So I think that's the key message of this lecture. If we leave as it is, India is most probably likely to achieve 6.5% rate of growth. But if you want to achieve something like 7.5%, 8%, there are lots of other things, hard work that you have to do, some hard choices you have to make. So I think extremely important lecture that you made. I'm sure the students will dig further and do more work on that. That's the whole idea. I think we have paucity of time. We could not take many questions. I'm sure we could have spent another 30-40 minutes. So he has to leave at about in 5 minutes time. So I can't thank him enough for coming over to Bhubaneswar and addressing the students and the members of OEA. We hope to bring you again to some other forum in some other university. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Now I request the Secretary of Odisha Economic Association, a very young and dynamic professor, Dr. Amarendra Das, for the word of thanks. Over to you. Excuse me, extremely sorry for that. So I request our President, Dr. Jugal Kishore Mahapatra sir, for felicitating our guest of honor. So please.
Banyak, boleh agak, banyak tu tadi. Bukan nak, tu tadi. Baik, oh baik. Oh baik, saling jangan.
As a representative of representing our Orissa art and culture, I hope sir will carry this memory of OEA along with him. Right? Now I will request the Secretary of Orissa Economic Association, Dr. Amarendra Das, to share the word of gratitude. So please.
Honorable Chief Guest of this meeting, Dr. Bibek Debroy, and Chairman of Economic Advisory Council of the Prime Minister, the President of Orissa Economic Association, Dr. Jugal Mahapatra, Professor Mitali Chanara, Head of the Department Analytical and Applied Economics at Utkal University, former President of Orissa Economic Association, former Vice Chancellor of Raman University, Executive Committee members of Orissa Economic Association and our live members of association, and faculty members of other departments, and dear students of Utkal University and especially Economics Department. So at the end, my job is to thank Dr. Bibek Debroy. I think we all will agree that we had really an illuminating talk. In fact, this is such a coincidence that if I remain alive, I will be retiring in 2047. So, so India will be celebrating 100 years of India's independence, and I will be retiring in that celebration mode. So I hope I can see actually India as a developed country, and I will be happily retiring as a student of economics. So I always think about how India will be, and we got a very clear roadmap today that most likely India will be a developed country, and per capita income, you got the numbers, so I don't have to talk about that. But he has also raised a concern that we have to pay taxes, and 23% of tax we don't pay. So we are still hovering around 11 to 12% of GDP. So we have to show also some patriotism, and so that we become a developed country. So thank you, sir, for giving a very illuminating talk and very clear. I think the numbers are very clear. So and we can happily actually go from there. And I also wish you learn life so that you also see India as a developed country in 2047. And also towards that. So it's not actually impossible. It's possible actually because the quality of life in India is improving. Okay, and so we can also focus on for best for all the front row people also. I wish you all good health. So because I look at my benchmark of my grandfather, 9700 and all that. Okay, so thank you, sir, very much. And then I thank the President of Orissa Economic Association, Dr. Jugal Kishore Mahapatra, the former Chief Secretary of Odisha. He is a very dynamic person, you all know. I don't have to speak much about him. And special thanks to him because he has only established this connection, and that's how we got this opportunity. And again, I am announcing you, here on 29th this month, we are having another, eminent speaker, Professor Arvind Subramaniam. That lecture will be online mode. So this is all possible due to the President of the Economic Association, Dr. Jugal Mahapatra. So thank you, sir, for taking the association to a new height. And then I thank Professor Mitali Chanara the head of the department, and also the member of executive committee OEA Economic Association, and also all the faculty members of Analytical and Applied Economics department for hosting this event. You know that a lot of energy goes into this, and they have put really tremendous effort in organizing this event successfully. And also special thanks due to the students of this department, who have been also working hard behind the screen. And so I thank the former president of our Economic Association and also the present executive committee members of OEA and also the future presidents of OEA and also the right members of OEA, executive members who have traveled long distances to attend this meeting, and the faculty members of the University from other departments and from, of course, neighboring university, Ramadhan University, and students of the University from other departments, and most importantly the media people who have attended here. I can see actually some good reporting tomorrow because I have seen a lot of good media people who have attended this event, and the staff of Utkal University who have really put a lot of effort in organizing this event. And again, special thanks to Professor Sikta for being the master of the ceremony today. So with this, I thank everyone if I have that everyone. So thank you so much.
Officially, we close this meeting with a hope to meet and have such lively discussions in the future. Thank you all for such a wonderful audience and amazing participation. Thank you.